Okay, so coming back now, speak about the intellectual paradigm. Now let's take a look at the material paradigm. There's, say, a system of practices and values that structure the distribution of resources, wealth, and power within society. And the material paradigm is as important to people as any intellectual paradigm, but they might be apt to think less about the material paradigm, even though we're aware of it on a day-to-day basis. Everyone's aware of this idea of where are their resources coming from, where's their food coming from, where are their clothing coming from, and we work within this framework. Well, it involves work and labor and going to university and money and all of those things, and that is all caught up, enmeshed in a larger system. I would say that often we don't think about the larger system itself, but when you get down to it, we're operating within a material structure as well that blankets just about the entire world here today in the year 2021. And there have been different manifestations of this material system. And as I say, not just practices, but also values, ideas as well, about the way that labor works, about the kinds of jobs people have, what they do for a living on a day-to-day basis, how you go about acquiring resources, including the basic sustenance needed to sustain life, how you go about acquiring food, water, how you go about acquiring wealth in whatever form it might take, and what form does power take within society? What form does status take within society? Yes, all of those things operate within a larger structuring paradigm, because the system we operate within today, which we call capitalism, is not the only material paradigm that has ever existed in the world, and that's what we're going to speak about next. The challenge of change. I think intellectual paradigms, it is very challenging to change an intellectual paradigm, but I don't think anything in the world is more difficult to change than a material paradigm. That is even more steadfast and rock solid than an intellectual paradigm for a lot of the reasons I mentioned, including the investment of particular institutions in the paradigm, but also because when we talk about a material paradigm, we're talking about, okay, who is wealthy and who is poor, and what kinds of jobs do people have, and what's their access to food and shelter like. I mean, we're talking about just basic questions about how people live on a day-to-day basis. And yes, people who are wealthy and powerful do become invested in the continuity of the paradigm. Why not? They're benefiting from it. So there is a lot of difficulty involved in restructuring a material paradigm. As I say, perhaps more difficulty than anything else. Just to give a couple of examples of this, we're going to speak about this later in the class, but it did seem during the course of the 20th century that the current material paradigm, capitalism, might be shaken to its foundations because there were entire countries that ostensibly, at least, became invested in the idea of toppling the capitalist order. The Soviet Union, for instance, a country that existed in the 20th century from 1917 to 1991, and this was no small country either. This was a superpower state with vast military and resources and wealth, an entire country that supposedly was committed to the idea of bringing down the material paradigm, of instigating a transition out of the capitalist system and into a socialist system, and they could not do it. We can debate, of course, how committed to that task they ever actually were, but however committed they were, it remains clear that they failed to do that. In fact, it's as though capitalism ultimately swallowed the Soviet Union, broke the country apart. Think of the case of China as well today. China still run by the Communist Party, and there you have another superpower state in the world today which is clearly running a market capitalist economy and system, and yet the official ideology of that country says that they are still committed to the idea of overturning the capitalist system in the future, right? At some point in the future. So again, massive state with these ideological principles, but they can't do it. They can't bring down the system, however invested they might be in that idea. And I think that gives you a great sense of just how difficult it might be to change a material paradigm. What we're looking at today